Now, in order to move forward with this concept of sustainable development, we're not going to be able to do it just with education, of course. There are many, many necessities that will have to be put in place internationally to try and move in this new direction. Overcoming corruption, improving quality of legislation. These are some of the things that are necessary. But at the heart of it, it was realized that education, public awareness and understanding, and training programs would be sort of at the heart of being able to move forward. So trying to understand then the role of education for sustainable development is crucial. Now, if there's anything you remember from my talk, it's these next few slides. Okay? As teachers, I think you will understand the concept of the crowded curriculum. The curriculum was probably crowded in 1920. It was probably crowded in 1900, etc. But I can remember as a superintendent of curriculum with the Toronto Board of Education for years, every week or so, someone would come in with a binder, a group with a very, very worthy cause and say, would you just put this in the curriculum? And I mean, there was no end to it. We got to call these adjectival educations. It's whenever you had to add the word education, awareness, or literacy after it, then this was something very worthy. You know, society needed it, but it was always left up to schools to play a part of it. And how do you work it in? Here's a list. There's about, I think, 70 on this page. I have a list of 110, and these are just from the north. This does not include tsunami education, organ donor education, etc. There is no end to the list. It seems that whenever society gets a cold, the education system gets pneumonia. So it's how do we deal with this? So the important thing to remember, we're not talking about yet another, number 105, sustainability education. No, that's not what the world is asking for. What we're really talking about here is what is the contribution that the entire education system, the world's education systems, the world's public awareness systems, and the world's training systems. What could be the contribution of these three huge components in trying to build and envision a more sustainable future? So that's really what ESD is. In the formal education system, this means not adding or tweaking into the curriculum alone. No, it's what is the output of our current education systems. Around the world, this is really taking traction. There's a global awakening in all of this. Here in Canada, the Council of Ministers of Education have formed a team from each of our provinces and territories to try and build a framework of what would this mean? What could change? In higher education, for instance, we see schools of business are changing rapidly. Architecture, engineering, medicine, all of this is trying to look at it from this tripartite approach of balancing social, environmental, and economic components. There are trade-offs and decision-making that has to be made. What do we do? What is the best way? But in each of our professions and each of us in our own daily life, we're going to be faced with that. And how do we build that awareness right into our education systems? Now, one of the big issues, of course, is the whole thing about the crowded curriculum. One of the emerging ways of dealing with this is to ease back on the myriad of small expectations, the outcomes, etc., that in many cases students find as somewhat irrelevant, should I say, and start looking at what are some of the really big issues that are meaningful to them, and then how can we build around these clusters of really big ideas. And at the heart of one of the big ideas is their future. And then how can we make that a more sustainable future? This issue is so big that the United Nations itself has declared a decade on education for sustainable development. It runs from 2005 to 2014. And the goal is to try and explore and to innovate and to develop new ways of embedding education for sustainable development, the whole concept and the learning into the world's education, public awareness, and training systems. Now, we're halfway through, and thanks to the German government, they held a meeting in 2009, in the spring, to look at the halfway point. What have we learned? What have we done? What needs to be done in the remaining half? Now, at that meeting in Bonn, Germany, 900 people were invited from the world's 200 countries. So about 3 people from each country, plus a number of UN staff, etc. And roughly 50 of the world's ministers of education came. They took part in this huge gathering, and they themselves came up with a declaration on how to move forward. And I would strongly suggest that anyone who is formal education in particular, because this is mainly what they were looking at, is the contribution of the world's formal education systems, go and Google and have a look at this. It can be found on the web at just Bonn Declaration, ESD, for Education for Sustainable Development. Now, we learned a number of things, and one of the issues that they came out with was the need to really put more effort into teacher education, into reorienting school systems, into engaging senior school officials, because oftentimes they themselves, the people who control what gets taught, what gets built, etc., need to understand the contribution of education itself. Now, all of this may seem somewhat overwhelming. What can I as a teacher, what can I as a student who's the president of a club, what can the individual do? Well, one of the big things that we've learned in trying to move forward is that no one group, no one discipline, no one person at any particular level can do it all. But we've learned through the strengths model, as we'll call this, is that every individual, every discipline, every subject, every group can do something with their existing background and their knowledge now. Once you understand what the problem is, then you can, each one of you right now can be thinking, what could I contribute? What am I already doing? And when we do that assessment, we see that an awful lot is already going on. Small, sort of individual, random acts of sustainability. But what we need desperately is some people to take a leadership role, a coordination role, a way of looking, what is the bigger picture? How can we reorient? How can we change? How can we be more effective? And so we need some people. The fourth component is to take a much stronger leadership role, to reach out. Who can bring mathematics, language arts, the arts, etc., bring them together to contribute in a much more coordinated way.